Hello, everybody. How are you going this week?
Hi, Vicky. We're good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to share my screen. All right. Okay, so we're going to make a start. We are in week 3 now, and so we are looking at social and emotional development and how they influence learners' confidence and engagement in the classroom. Before we start, I just would like to do the acknowledgement of country. I acknowledge and pay respect to the ancestors and descendants upon the land upon which we work, meet, and study. I'm mindful that the land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So today we're exploring how emotions and relationships shape learning, and we are going to look more specifically at two new theorists, Erickson and Bandura. And we'll look at how confidence and belonging develop and how teachers can foster that in classrooms. So I'm hoping that you'll talk a lot more this week. We're up to week 3. I'm hoping that you're getting a little bit more comfortable with the format of the workshops and the tutorials. So I've got some little discussions, and obviously I've got the mentees as well. And we're going to do a mentee first for a warm-up, get our brains in the mood as soon as it loads. It's just having a moment, isn't it?
Hi Vicky, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Exactly.
Have you got a question while we're waiting for that to load? Or are you just saying hello?
I just want to say hello. I have submitted my first assignment yesterday, actually.
Well, it's very exciting. So everyone's got a couple
Uh,
more days. Let me just go to mentee
I
and
think
see
I
what's...
don't know why. Like I still like it's show. Like the cover sheet. I attached the cover sheet. It shows that like 20% or something similarity, but I don't know. I said okay. This is just only showing um into the cover sheet.
Yes, sometimes that happens. So if everyone uploads the same cover sheet, that's going to be something that's similar between everybody, and it's not something that you worry about.
Yeah.
We don't look at the number when we are doing the marking. We look at what is represented by the number. So when you click on that number, it'll show you, it'll highlight things, and that's the things that we're looking at. So we're not specifically looking for a specific number when we do the marking. All right, let me just try
Okay.
that. try that again. If it doesn't work, we'll have to just stick with chatting online instead. Okay, let's go. See how we go. No, all right. No Minties today.
Oh,
Okay,
that's
so
good.
our first thing is Erickson's. So his psychosocial theory, he mapped out 8 stages of psychosocial development. The ones most relevant to a teaching degree stretch from early childhood through to adolescence. Okay, so it'll depend which group you will be teaching in the future, which one is more applicable. Okay, so for people doing early childhood, teaching young children, the main thing is about autonomy. Can I do things by myself? So they're trying to, you know, be independent. And then in the primary school years, it's about industry. It's about trying to make or do things well. And then by adolescence, it's about identity. So who am I and where do I belong in the scheme of things? Across all 3 of these phases, the theme is confidence built through competence. So when we praise, we want to build competence, not a dependence on approval. So you may have seen things, I've seen some things sort of in the news and stuff about kindergartens that tried not saying the word good in class to see if it helped kids be less dependent on approval. So you still want to be giving them praise and, you know, making them feel like they're learning the correct things, but you don't really want to have them depending on you for approval all the time. So maybe instead of saying good job, you could say, oh, you really stuck with that even when it got tricky, you know, sort of praise the thing that you want them to do rather than just a generic good job or good kid, good girl, good boy, all of those sorts of things are sort of the research is suggesting we should move away from that kind of thing. So you want to support the kind of intrinsic motivation. Okay, so intrinsic is something that they have ownership over, whereas extrinsic are things that are around them. So when you say good job and they feel good because you said that, then that makes them seek more approval if you understand what I'm saying there. So in your own context, the early years in primary or secondary, think about what industry or identity looks like for your students and what experiences tell them things like I can do this, or rather than I can't do this. Okay, so you can see there, yep, we got all of those. Sorry about that. All right, okay, my Menti's working now. Okay, I'm going to put the link in the chat. And I want you to I just want to get a quick sense of who's in the room. So depending on what you pick here is going to tell me whether you're early childhood or, you know, primary school or high school. We're likely to have a bit of a mix because this subject is core for everybody. Those people saying secondary in the chat there, which one of the mentees is that? Which one are you going to be thinking about? I've just put the number there if you prefer to do that on your phone. All right, so let's get a sense of how many we have. Okay, so we got a lot of people doing secondary and less doing primary, and then a medium amount doing early childhood there. All right, so let's have a look at some practical things that teachers can do to build confidence and avoid the praise trap. So from Erickson's theory, we are looking at designing experiences where students feel capable. So we start with achievable challenges, so things that stretch but don't overwhelm. So you can see that there's some overlap here with Vygotsky. We're in that zone of proximal development. And then when we give feedback on that, we shift the focus to effort and strategy and progress. So for example, instead of saying you're very clever, we might say you tried 2 different ways to solve that problem. That's persistence. And we'll be giving students some choice. Also supports autonomy for younger children. So even small choices send the message that your ideas matter. And I understand that in a big class of, primary and secondary, you can't have every student choosing something different. And obviously you're going to restrict the number of choices that they can have most of the time. But even just a small amount of choice makes the students have a bit more ownership over their learning and feel like they belong to the group. So things like group work and peer recognition and inclusive classroom language all reinforce the feeling that the student fits in with everyone. And those are the conditions that help learners move from I can't do this to I can. And as I mentioned, these strategies also link to Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, which we saw earlier in the unit. The zone of proximal development is that sort of sweet spot between what the learner can do alone and what they can do with support. And when we pitch our tasks in that zone, challenging but achievable with guidance, we help students experience genuine success. Okay, so it was a little bit hard. It wasn't so easy that they can just go, oh, that was too easy. It was a little bit hard, and that will help to build their self-efficacy and their self-confidence, which self-efficacy is leading into Bandura. So all these theories are very closely related to each other. So the idea of creating capable, confident learners flows directly into our next theory, which is Bandura, who explains how those beliefs in ability actually develop. So Bandura's social cognitive theory is about learners having agency. Okay, so learners have the ability to affect their behaviors and their actions and also their environment. And at the same time, their behaviors affect the person and the environment affects the person. And that's why there's sort of two-way arrows between all of these different things. This little model is called reciprocal determinism because each thing influences the other. And, behavior might influence environment through a person. So any of those things can interact in any way. Okay, learners don't need to experience everything firsthand though. So that was one of Bandura's important contributions as well. So he showed that learners can watch others and learn without actually performing the activity themselves. So if you looking through the readings there, he had an experiment where he had this thing called a bobo clown, which was an inflatable clown. And if adults were mean to the inflatable clown and hit it and things, the kids would copy that behavior. And when that first came out, you know, people were really worried about things like television and things having influences on kids, because it was way back in the 50s. And so that is called vicarious reinforcement, or learning vicariously, which means through another person. And vicarious reinforcement can be a really good way to build confidence. So if students see other people that they can relate to, who they think they are equal to or like, succeeding at things, then they're more likely to try it. It doesn't work as well if they see people they think are better than them or worse than them or different than them. But if they're similar to them, it works really well. So over time, these things develop self-efficacy, which is our belief in our ability to organize and carry out actions to reach a goal. And self-efficacy is really context dependent. So some kids might have really good self-efficacy in maths and not very good self-efficacy in, I don't know, poetry, writing poems. That doesn't mean they'll never be able to write poems. It means that they haven't developed the self-efficacy in their area. And the thing about self-efficacy is it is really highly correlated to academic success. There's heaps and heaps of experimental data that links those two things together. And one of the reasons is if you have high self-efficacy for something, you have higher persistence in, you know, keep going. Every time you fall down, you keep going, you get up, you have another go. And you will try more strategies to reach your goal. Because if you believe you can reach your goal, you'll try a different way. You fall down, you get up, you try a different way, and you keep trying until you get the goal. And then once you've got the goal, you've got a sort of self-fulfilling increase in self-efficacy. But if you start with low self-efficacy, then you won't persist and you won't try different methods, different strategies to do that. Okay, so one of the things that teachers can do to help with that is modeling strategies. Okay, so you model how to do the problem. You might even throw in a couple of errors and model yourself not getting flustered by the error, and then move on from there. As you're doing it, you're thinking aloud so that the student knows, you know, the difference between what a student thinks and what a teacher thinks as they're doing their problems is a novice versus an expert. If you think aloud and show them your thought processes, then they can learn those thought processes. So those provide authentic success experiences that show that effort pays off. And then you can use feedback that focuses on progress and strategy and not just correctness. Okay, so it's not just about correcting every little error that students make. And you can probably guess that I'm going to say that also relates back to, you know, Erikson's industry and Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. So every scaffolded success becomes real-world evidence for the learner's own belief, their own self-efficacy. Okay, so you start with the scaffolding and then you gradually take the scaffolding away. All right. Which scenario best illustrates vicarious reinforcement? So all of these are good strategies, but which is the strategy that's illustrating vicarious reinforcement? All right, let's have a look. Okay, so that is the one that's showing vicarious reinforcement. The others have got different forms of reinforcement in them. So A, teacher gives sticker to every student who finishes their work on time. That's direct reinforcement. So the reward follows directly after the personal behavior. And that's a behaviorist, that's from behaviorist theorists. And we'll talk about that in the next week. C is showing modeling. Okay, it's useful. The teacher is doing a how to solve the problem, probably thinking out loud as they're doing it on the board, and that's a helpful thing, but it doesn't come from reinforcement. And then the last one is self-reinforcement. So Bandura also describes self-reinforcement. It's an internal thing, so we don't usually observe that. We kind of have to ask students if that's a thing that they do. And in the literature, that's something that, you know, gets asked of students on self-report surveys. So some people might, you know, say, if I finish this assignment on time, then I'm allowed to take myself to the movies, or I'm allowed to get McDonald's, or whatever little reward that they want to give themselves. And Bandura also describes people who give themselves little punishments as well. So if they don't get the assignment finished, then they're not allowed to, you know, they take something away from themselves. No, they take screen time away or something like that. All right. So if we want to link these three theories together, we can see that they complement each other. So Vygotsky is reminding us that learning begins between people before it becomes internalized. Students observe, imitate, try things out with support. That's scaffolding. And it's also the basis of modeling and vicarious learning. So it's like Bandura was building on Vygotsky. Erickson focuses on the emotional result of those interactions. So when learners experience success and recognition, that will build their sense of industry and belonging. And again, the part of Erickson's scale that you're sort of more interested in will depend on which group you're teaching. Bandura then explains what happens next. So those social interactions and scaffolded successes translate into self-efficacy. So the belief that I can do this, and that will help a lot with motivation. Together they describe a social cycle of learning where we have social support, shared success, internalized belief. Every time a student sees or experiences success, whether it's their own or a peer's, it helps to strengthen both their competence and their competence in doing those things. And that's how social environment literally builds motivation. So let's look at what the cycle looks like in a classroom situation. So we've got a little mini case study. Jane is quiet and hesitant to answer questions in class. She often gives up quickly when she's unsure. Her teacher notices she completes written tasks well when she works alone, but freezes when asked to present in front of others. This is the thing, obviously, most people have at some point in their life where they're just really nervous about speaking in front of others. Erickson might say that Jane is struggling with industry and inferiority, depending on where she is in her, her pathway through those phases. And she needs experiences of success and recognition, not just being graded, but evidence that she can contribute and be valued. So you might want to sort of start with smaller group activities as far as presenting goes, rather than presenting in front of the whole class. Vygotsky helps us see the social process, so maybe Jane might benefit from some scaffolding, for example, rehearsing with a peer first, or presenting to a small group before the whole class. That reduces the pressure, but still lets her practice within her zone of proximal development. So we don't want to make the task in the middle circle where it's too easy, and we want them to be working in that zone of proximal development. And then Bandera would explain that what this does for her self-efficacy. So each time Jane experiences or even watches a peer succeed in a similar task, it's possible that her belief in her own ability grows through vicarious reinforcement. So it's possible we could model confident speaking, a teacher or a peer, preferably a peer, because they're more closely connected to the student. So if the model is too far away and the student can't identify with the model, it makes it less likely that that's going to be vicarious reinforcement, because they'll just think, oh, well, they've got this and that and the other thing that I don't have, and therefore I can't do it, but they can do it. So if you pick someone who's more like them to model it, they're more likely to internalize it. And then we would give Jane scaffolded opportunities to try it herself with support and provide specific feedback, like you paused and made eye contact and that helped people follow you. And you celebrate the effort and not just the outcome. So over time, these experiences move Jane from I can't public speak to, well, maybe I can do that. Does anyone have any things they would like to share about that? Any stories they've got from placement or groups that you've been in?
Vicky, sorry, Edward here.
Hi, Edward.
Yeah, I've seen this not as a teacher, but as a parent. When my daughter started she's in grade 2. I think like one of the activities was that she was to go on the stage for one of the school assemblies. And then the teacher sort of had one of her peers sort of guide her to the stage and stand next. So I found it quite helpful to build Anaya's confidence. Yeah. So that is one experience I
Yeah,
could think of. Thank you.
yeah, that's great.
So Vicky, I'd like to share something that I noticed on my placement as well just recently. So we had a student and he had generalized anxiety disorder. And so when I was supposed to take the class, my mentor, she informed me that this student is going to be working well on their own. But if I'm going to, go near them or try to directly talk to them in front of the rest of the class, they're going to freeze and they're going to not respond. So she told me that instead, what is going to work with them is that if I go close to them and lower down my voice and basically come to their level and just, then give them affirmative words of feedback on whatever they have done so far during the lesson, and then just move away and like maybe not, because they're not going to respond to me because I was an unknown person to them. But that was a technique that I think that is practicing Bandera's theory for somebody who's facing generalized anxiety disorder. And I think that really relates
Yeah,
to what is written here about Jane.
yeah, that's a great one. I saw something in the chat there about reduced cognitive load. So Dylan is suggesting that if we just get Jane to present something she's very familiar with, and she's purely just focusing on the speaking rather than being worried about the material. And that's a good one too. All right, so I've got some, what have I got here? You've got 100 points to allocate. So this is, yep.
Hi, it's Reb here. I might just add something else. I've seen an instance where there was a student in year 2 who was very shy, and the teacher, this is not in my experience as a teacher, this is in my experience as a parent. So a friend of my daughter's was in this class and she was very shy. And so the teacher assumed the child could not read because the child was too shy to read out. And so that impacted on her report. The report, end of semester report, said that the child could not read, which was not correct. The child could read, but she was too shy to read out loud. So I think that's a good cautionary tale for us as teachers to assume that somebody can't read just because they won't read something out.
Yeah. That is very interesting. All right, for this mentee, you need to allocate 100 points. So if you think something is truly awesome, you can give it the full 100 points. Or if you think something is, a few things are equally awesome, you can spread your 100 points around and we'll see what comes out at the top.
Go away. Yeah.
All right, that's a bit of a tricky one. We'll have a look how we went. All right, praising and recognizing effort seems to have a higher number. And scaffolding within the zone of proximal development. So I think those are all good. I'd probably be cautious about giving her more independent work time because that might be taking her too far away. That might be like taking her out of the zone of proximal development. So what do you think, Reb?
It depends on what we're trying to work on.
Yeah.
If what we're trying to work on is her ability to speak with others, I definitely would not recommend taking her away from others.
Yeah, for sure. So independent work when it's appropriate, but yeah, not if this is what we're working on. So we can't sort of keep taking them out of the zone of proximal development because it doesn't always, it might feel kind, but always the right way to go, I think. All right, so we're going to shift now to identity forming and belonging. And we're looking at Jordan, who is 14 and recently started high school. He's bright but inconsistent, sometimes highly motivated, sometimes disengaged. He's experimenting with different friend groups and interests, and his teachers notice his attitude changes depending on who he's with. So he is testing boundaries just to see where he fits in because he's in that identity versus role confusion stage of adolescence. Now, with this one, you have to place each approach on the grid for supporting Jordan's learning and sense of identity. So the impact that it has on learning is low impact on learning to high impact. And individual work to sort of belonging. So you can put them anywhere in there.
Do you mean that this is where he's currently at, or what an intervention might look like?
You're trying to support Jordan's learning. So what do you think would support, how do you think these things would support his learning? How is it going to impact well on learning? Are they things that are going to, oh, I've made a typo there, individual to belonging. Things that affect his belonging. I just want you to think about, you know, the kinds of things that you could do and why you might do them. So which approaches would build his identity and belonging, and which ones would support his learning? So ideally we want, you know, something up here. Let's see if we can see them as we go. Oh, there we go. So peer group projects for choice is ranking quite well in the belonging/learning square. I think personal goal setting would probably be more of an individual thing than a belonging thing. And quiet independent study, more of an individual, yeah, and up in the learning. So I like the placement of number 4. I don't know that there'd be that much belonging to personal goal setting. There's some people putting it way down the bottom, and there's a lot of people putting it up in that belonging/learning square. I think it would do good learning, but maybe not good belonging. What about 5? That's our spread for 5. And this is our spread for 4. So quiet independent study, most of you agree, is going to be more of an individual activity than a belonging group activity. But you feel quite variable about how much impact that's going to have on his learning. Do you think that's because he won't be motivated to do that? What about 3? Whole class recognition and praise. Most of you are ranking that quite high. Okay, that was an interesting activity. I liked it.
Personal goal setting and reflection, I think, is the best option.
This one, personal goal setting and reflection.
Yes.
I feel like personal goal setting wouldn't contribute to belonging. I feel that would be more of an individual thing. If it was me, I would be putting it over here. So I would put it where those people have put it, down in this bottom square. All right, well done, good job. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the assessment task. How are you all going with that? Do you have any specific questions about the reflection task? Yeah, the reflection task, the portfolio.
No, not for now.
No, you're all good. All right. Well, I just wanted to go through this method 1/method 2 thing. I've had a few people email me about that. The two things that were shown in the assessment brief were this theory first or reflection first kind of thing. So according to Erickson, see, I'm using Erickson's name here and putting the citation in brackets. Adolescence involved, blah, blah, blah. And then in the second one, I don't actually use Erickson's name at all. I just say adolescence is a time when young people explore who they are. And my reference for that is Erickson. So,
Ma'am, I have question regarding, can I use both methods into the one
yes,
sum?
I was just going to say, you don't have to choose one of these two methods. These both of these methods are valid methods and you can use them interchangeably. Okay.
Oh,
So
okay.
if you want, you don't have to just always stick to writing like the first one. And in fact, it's probably bad to do that because when you're reading it, it gets a bit clunky when you keep saying the person's name all the time. The other thing I noticed in previous marking is that this sounds more authoritative. So example 2, where I say adolescence is a time when young people explore, and then put Erickson in brackets, sounds like I know what I'm talking about, more than according to Erickson, adolescence involves young people exploring who they are. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes, ma'am, got it.
So if you keep referring to this first one all the time, it can start to feel a little bit clunky if that's the only way that you use throughout the whole writing.
Will
So you
the
need to sort of
registry
mix and match.
will the registry and
So-
flow of our paper be marked? If it sounds clunky,
well,
would that be negatively impacted on our grade?
let's look at the criterion number 3, 10%. Writing style is clear and professional and delivers a coherent flow of ideas. Okay, so that would be where if it's difficult to read, it's, you know, you're going to go further down the scale there. If it's nice and flows really well, it'll be easy for us to read and easy to mark, easy to understand what you're telling us.
Vicky, with the questions itself for the assessment, is it advised not to include the questions in the response? I mean, we can, a lady was telling me this morning from the uni who's a assist with, learning support, but you can obviously include it in your own draft, but basically not to include it in the response. Is that advisable?
Well, we won't mark you down if you include it or you don't include it.
Okay.
As long as we can tell when you've moved from one to the
Yep.
next, it doesn't contribute to your word count. So if you've included them, we'll take note that you've included
Sure.
them. And if your word count is a little bit high, we'll take note of that. Yeah, so that's up to you. You don't need to do like an overall introduction or an overall conclusion, though. They're each individual standalone pieces of writing.
Hmm.
Yeah, ma'am, I got some information regarding the previous student assignment that is already submitted into the assessment tasks. So I took some information. No, not took in, like I just checked that what is the phrases and how I need to put it, and that's why it's
Yeah, this one here.
yeah, there's the clearly mentioned everything inside, like what you need to do and what is the task you have to write it, and then I submit it.
Yep. Okay, cool. All right, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you all again.
Vicky, I've got one question if there's still time.
Yeah, there's time.
I love Erickson, and I'm just diving deep into it. Revisiting him is amazing, especially coming from the States and the impact he had there. I'm struggling with something though. I know he's considered discontinual, but Erickson proposed that in each stage, right, represents a crisis to be resolved. This crisis, is it a one-time event, or is it a dynamic tension that students and learners can revisit throughout their lives? And if that's the case, doesn't that make it continual? I understand he sets it in stages, but it just seems like it's in conflict with what he's taken from Freud with the id, ego, and superego, and how the ego is constantly in flux. Again, that harks back to a continual theory. It just seems
Yeah,
like
I
it's
think
somewhat clashing with itself.
yes, I think that what Erickson was noticing, because most of the people that studied children kind of had kids and then were noticing how interesting they were, what funny things they did. I think what he was noticing was that those things that he's divided it up into, the stages, that's when that tends to happen. That's not to say you'll never sort of think about that again in your future, but that's what tends to happen in that phase of your life. Whereas, you know, when you get to the sort of the end phase and you're reflecting on the whole thing again and deciding, you know, was it all worth it? You sort of can
Right.
revisit some of those things.
But he's kind of having his cake and eating it at the same time when he says
I
that
know.
if you don't solve these problems at these stages,
Yeah,
you
you
reach
can't move on.
stagnation. But then how do we
Yes.
move on and revisit those problems if we haven't solved those problems?
Yeah. But, you know, like I say, I think he's just noticing, because it started with the kids, of course, and then he extended it up to the adults. He's
Mm.
just noticing the things that it seemed like to him were happening with the kids at those stages. You know, they kind of moved on from that. They got to a different stage, and then it felt to him like they'd moved on from that and they'd gone to a different stage.
I remember reading something too about the impact or the consequence if that crisis is not met. So I'm no expert on Erickson, like, you know, in depth. I couldn't cite where I read it, but there was something that I saw that said if that crisis is not met, that there will be consequences that a person will carry with them in terms of their development. I remember for anyone that's in my tute on a Friday, we were talking about how, you know, a lot of us, because this is a postgrad course, a lot of us are switching careers, or some of us are switching careers, and how, you know, I had my existential crisis right on time with Erickson's theory around when you hit midlife.
Yeah. Don't you hate that?
When you hit midlife, you sort of, you know, start wondering, you know, what's my purpose? What am I doing? And I realized that marketing was not my purpose. And so when I was learning all about Erickson, when I moved into education, I was like, oh, wow, look at me. I was right on time when I made my switch into education. But there was something that I was reading around, you know, sort of the hangover that you'll carry with you if you don't actually meet that challenge. If you just shelve it, there are consequences.
Yeah. You know, psychological ones like Freud talks about.
Freud.
Freud. Yeah, notice I kind of left him out.
Yeah, him and his pseudosexual fantasies. Yeah.
Okay, so we all good with the assessment then. What is it? 4 days and it's due.
4
3
days.
days.
3. Oh, I'm still on. Oops.
Okay, well, if nobody has any other questions about the assessment, I'm going to go and get ready for the tutorial.
Ma'am, I have the
Yep.
question regarding that you told me. I have the question like that primary in like the question is industry and inferiority. What is the main difference in between two contexts? Then I can note it.
You'll have to go and read Erickson for that.
Okay.
That's very detailed. That's a, I can do it or I can't do it. That's the summary of that. I have industry or I am inferior. All right, we all good then? Because I got another tutorial straight after this.
Miss,
So.
I have a few questions.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the assessor? The name?
The unit assessor is me. So
Okay.
Vicky Dunk. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And because there was two different sections for tutor and assessor, so I thought it was two different people.
Sometimes it is.
Okay, and do we need page numbers for the portfolio?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think it's mentioned anywhere, so I was just confused a
No, I
bit.
didn't.
And
No, I didn't see it
If
anywhere. I
if we
think it
wanted to
says
add them
something
for
about.
flow,
Yes, you could. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like I'm going to accidentally drop your paper, which, happens sometimes when you hand in papers. So because they're
Yeah.
all online now, the flow will not be interrupted. So it's, you don't really need to have them.
Yeah, and the font sizes for all the text should be 12, right?
If that's what it says in APA 7, then yes.
Yeah, APA 7, it should be Times New Roman, 12 font
12.
size in double space, please. And that's just to save your markers because we
But-
get a bit cross-eyed if
Yeah.
it's in single space.
Hmm.
There's a
Yes, it's
question
very.
here asking whether it's due on Friday or Sunday. I'm not sure where you got Sunday from, but it's always
No.
been due on Friday the 14th at 11:59 p.m. Is that correct, Vicky?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Friday at midnight. Yep.
And I've got one last question. Do I need to delete the draft submission or not?
No, you don't. It's in a different Dropbox, so
Yeah.
it won't interfere with the actual Dropbox at all.
Perfect. Thank you.
No
Hi,
worries.
Vicky. I also have a question. Sorry. Do I need to include the cover sheet? And if I do, should it be like the first page of the portfolio?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
So when you include that cover sheet, make sure you're putting all the stuff in about the Gen AI. The new cover sheet has specific area where it says how you've used Gen AI, or whether you're saying that you haven't used it at all. Okay, so that will help us when we're looking at what the AI percentage. So if you've handed a draft in, you'll see there's a plagiarism percentage and there's an AI percentage. So we'll have to be looking at both of those things. So we need to know how you've used AI.
Hi, Vicky. Just confirming that the word limit is not included in the cover sheet and the references.
No, that's right. The word limit doesn't include those things.
I think you have to move.
All right. And the one statement from Gen AI or AI from the portfolio we have to add in the
Hang on,
cover
just
sheet the way I use in Word.
sorry, hang on just 1 second. Sorry, can you go again? I think I've got that person's microphone. I didn't hear any of that. No, we've lost it.
Hi, Vicky. It's Mudassar. Can I just ask a question, please?
Yes.
Just on this um, assessment brief, um, to solve this assessment, there's instructions. There's a section of instruction in which it gives us 6 items, and
Yes.
then it says that respond to 3 to 4 items from the list below that demonstrate your engagement with the concepts and principles. So my question is that if we give just a response to the 3 items, would that be sufficient? Or I was just thinking that if I give a response to the 4 items, but it would reduce the words count for each item.
Yes, that's right. So it's up to you to choose whether you would like to do 3 or 4.
Right.
It won't really make any difference to the marking as long as you make the clear links between the theory and the process of doing it in the classroom. So if you find that you don't have room to write about 4, then you should just write about 3.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking, that um, if I just write 3, so there will be not much more words left for the item 4. So it just
Yes.
again, but actually, I mean, you have given the answer that it's very flexible. So it's up to us that how we can manage, but as long as the idea flows and we give the well-connected ideas and explanation to the theories. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Thanks for that.
No worries.
Hello. I just
Hello.
asked this question in the morning on the tutorial, but I just wanted to just double check. So, for example, in one of the item, the well-being one, like I have written the well-being one through my research, and I have just got the journals, and I have written as per that thing, and I didn't look to the content which you have taught today. So that is that
That's
okay?
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yep,
that's
that's okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No worries.
Just
All right.
one last question.
Yep.
May I know your area of specialization? Is it like an education psychologist or something? What's your area of
What's my what?
Yeah, specialized area. I know you're a doctor. You have a PhD. But what area are you specialized?
What area do I specialize in?
Yes.
The brain and learning I specialize in.
Okay, is that in education psychology or something like that?
There is education psychology in my PhD, yeah, but it's more about learning and how the brain works and things like that. So it's not about developmental psychology. It's about motivation and self-efficacy and, educational things.
Yeah, I can see it's really complex.
Thanks.
All right, no worries. Okay, I've got to go because I got the tute. So I'll see some of you over in the tute. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
See you
Bye.
next week.
Bye, Vicky. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.